Welcome back to SwitchCorner, my name is Alex and today we're taking a look at the Grand Theft Auto Trilogy Definitive Edition on the Nintendo Switch. Now my original intention it was to do a full review of this one, but once I got hands on it was time to skip that idea and go straight to a performance review. So with that luck, hit subscribe if you love the Switch, as much as we will do here, join our growing family, and let's get started. So today we'll be breaking down this video into what's included, a quick recap on story, the frame rate, graphics, audio, and then we'll kind of wrap things up. To start though, within this trilogy we do get the first 3 entries in the series built around a 3D engine. Up until this point they were 2D top-down, still incredible games as well, but this was game-changing when it released. An open world, an adult story, great humour, and some of the best writing out there. I grew up on them myself and they are now a part of gaming history. So story, and the third game throws you into what is a revenge tale. It's set in Liberty City, there's a bank heist and your girlfriend betrays you, now you're out on the hunt. Vice City then gives us a story of Tommy Vercetti. It's his rise to power after leaving prison, it's this fantastic Miami-like setting. And then finally San Andreas, Cole Johnson escapes this town but has to return when his mother is murdered, his friends are in trouble and the law has betrayed him. All of these are fantastic. They use the series formula of on-foot exploration, gunplay and driving to complete missions, while also facing side quests and all sorts of activities. The gameplay doesn't change from beginning to end, but the difficulty ramps, and often with these games you'll just find yourself jumping in to cause some mayhem, which was always my go-to back in the day. The Switch version as well then, for additions, it throws in gyro support as well and HD rumble, something I did not expect to see. So going entry by entry for performance, I spent the most time with Grand Theft Auto 3. I wanted to start at the beginning, work my way forward, but issues, they are immediately apparent. The big thing, the obvious thing just watching the footage, the frame rate here, it's just a bit of a disaster. This should have been locked at 30, maybe even pushed higher honestly, but no, instead we get a constant fluctuation. It is just so unusual. It feels like the game's almost stuttering, but drive then into a busy intersection or get, let's say, a bit more creative, blast around the city at high speed, and it can go anywhere from 20 to 32, with the average I'd say sitting somewhere around 25. So I did 4 tests for Grand Theft Auto 3 on its frame rate: normal, casual driving, a little walking around, that's by far the most stable. In the rain, that did not play as much of an impact as I expected on what was already kind of poor. And finally, I killed a whole lot of people in this world and I got this high law enforcement rating chasing after me. The latter there, it really pushed things and I managed to get it spiking down as low as 17 frames per second before it kind of forced itself to correct. That's a big problem though. A game like this, the driving is key and a fluctuating frame rate leads to unresponsive controls. There was times when I completely spun out or collided with something as it worked against me. I was actually always pretty good at these games as well, but not here, not in this state. I just constantly felt like I was swimming against the tide. Vice City then is sadly more of the same. At this point that kind of felt like a win honestly, and that's because they really dialed up the lighting for this entry. A whole lot of neon washes over these streets, and I figured if the third, more basic game struggles, then I'm confident this entry will as well. I'd describe it as similar performance, so we're floating around 25 on average if you're driving at any sort of decent speed, but find more cars in your line of sight, or perhaps you're in a more populated area and it's definitely gonna struggle. It's got that same fluctuation that leads to an incredibly unresponsive feeling to it all. Things again then here of course take a turn for the worse as the carnage gets a little bit more manic, and you may be saying, well, don't get the cops after you, but that very much becomes a mechanic in the game in those latter stages. It wants to dial up the difficulty, and to do that it's throwing more cops at you. Well, I think it's fair to say San Andreas is everyone's favourite entry as well. I actually love this one down to that 80s neon like Miami setting, so this was particularly disappointing for me. San Andreas then is by far the best of the bunch, and this really shows why they should have allowed the purchases individually as well, which is no doubt coming further down the line. They're just kind of cashing in now, but I'd almost say I could recommend this one at the 20 bucks it would be. Now it's not perfect, do not get me wrong, but we don't see the constant fluctuation, so it leads to an experience that feels a whole lot smoother, and I felt like I couldn't be blaming the game here for my crappy driving anymore, and that's really all I wanted. No one wants a game working against them, and yes, it definitely struggles at points, but not like 3 or 5 City. This is now where I'm going to be starting, and I'll move my way backwards, hoping a patch comes into play. So visually, and we'll kind of include a little bit of handout here as well, but the world, it looks absolutely improved. Dated for sure, still, you know, blocky, low detail, but watching the original build, it is a noticeable upgrade. Some love it, others hate it. I'm probably sitting somewhere in between. For me, it's a case of, look, if you'd given me a locked frame rate and simply upscaled visuals, probably would have been happier, honestly, because I suspect a lot of this new visual work is responsible for the challenges. You know, new character models, some new texture work, and then the big one, the lighting engine and the car models, they look fantastic. There's a ton of shadow work as well. The issue I have with the visuals though, we've got a decent looking world with some new car models, but the pop-in is absolutely terrible. I'm talking cars and pedestrians appearing maybe feet away from you. Combine that with the laggy input thanks to that frame rate, and it can absolutely spell disaster. Also, the new car models are almost so high in comparison to the world itself. It almost feels a little bit disjointed, like they are floating, just because of that like visual difference. I've crashed so had cars explode all sorts because of oncoming traffic that I could not see. At one point I was coming around a corner, pedestrians, they appeared with no time to stop. Then I unintentionally mowed them all down because, yeah, I had no chance. Guess who was standing at the side of the road though? The cops, they were ready to chase me down. They did just that, they caught me and I failed the mission I was attempting. That is not a scenario you should be facing in a game like this. Also then, the lack of fog effects that we used to mask some of this world, they are now missing. These are big maps, and when you're driving around looking out over them, they can seem, I've got to say, a little bit flat by today's standards. Resolution then, and it's variable. On the big screen it was particularly noticeable with an almost blurred effect to it all. Handout naturally though corrects this and sharpens things up. My favourite part, I think, visually though, it has to be the cutscenes. Remasters like this can often overlook cutscenes, but they've put the time in, they've upscaled them the right way, and they definitely make a huge advance. Audio finally, and it's fine. It's not seen the treatment some of the visuals have though, and it definitely sounds like it could do with maybe a little restoration at points in its work. These are old samples made for much smaller file sizes. You know, we couldn't work around them back then, but we definitely can now. Fortunately though, the cars, the gunplay, that all still sounds great. The soundtrack then, it's got a decent selection from the original games still intact, but they've definitely had to remove quite a bit as well. It makes sense, but don't expect to hear all the same songs. These licensing agreements, they were years ago and naturally expired. So the final verdict, and yeah, Grand Theft Auto Definitive Edition, it's lacking the definitive part of the name, honestly. Performance should have come first, and it's kind of sad to see the games in this state. It needed more time clearly, or even needed to be balanced from console to console, because what I'm hearing right now is it's actually struggling on other platforms as well. They've tried to do one size fits all, and it's clearly not working out. It's funny though, I love this series, I love what Rockstar make, but this feels, and I hate to say it, a little bit like a cash grab. Rockstar back in the day were incredibly exciting. I felt like they pushed against the norm and almost, let's say, the corporate side of gaming. But I guess you stick around long enough and it's just so common to become what you originally set out to be against. Rockstar's library as it stands for the last 5 years, we got a great LA Noire VR entry, we got the mighty Red Dead Redemption 2, but what I think they're going to be remembered for is, let's face it, the 10,000 variations of GTA 5 and a whole lot of ways to get more cash out of you with GTA Online. Now we're basically adding a half-assed port, cashing in on the name as well, and this name, it deserves so much more. I'm still a believer though, but it's definitely time for something new. It's time to give the name the respect it deserves. Also, I know at this point, because I know it will be mentioned, Rockstar didn't technically port or develop this, but who you choose and who you put your faith in is a reflection of the studio, but also they definitely saw it before release. They chose to release it in this state. Rockstar, as I said, it's a name I associate with quality. Hopefully they're not forgetting that, and hopefully they make things right with a quick patch. I'm sure they will get them patched up though, and I'll absolutely be there when they do. These are a part of gaming history, but playing them in this current state, outside of maybe San Andreas, I fear they'll almost ruin my love for them, and that's not a price I'm willing to pay. Hopefully this helped then. Let me know if you have any questions below in the comments. I'll try to get them answered. And yeah, with that, a shout out to the patrons of the channel who are just going above and beyond to support SwitchCorner. It helps more than you know, so thank you all so much. then hit subscribe if you love the Switch as much as we all do here. Join our growing family, and I'll see you all on the next video. Thanks everyone.